Okay, but
Well,
I
I don't
want to
know.
probe this political identity thing a little bit. So the Democrats, in your view, are better than Republicans. Here, let me play devil's advocate. People will realize that, of course, I have a great deal more sympathy for Republicans than you do. They will realize that from our previous conversations. But I just want to play
I should
devil's
say
advocate.
that I felt like you did 20 years ago, maybe 15, but things have changed. Go ahead.
Trump probably in MAGA. The MAGA. I'm guessing that's what's pushed you in this direction. But I want to talk about crime. What do you think about the Justice DAs? How about Larry Krasner in Philadelphia? How about this guy in Manhattan? I forget his name now. Braggs, Alvin.
Yeah.
How about Kim Foxx in Chicago? And, what about the guy that was recalled in San Francisco, Chesa Bodine? And what about the guy down in Los Angeles who's in a similar spirit? There are others. Mm-hmm. And they have rescinded the use of cash bail and put a lot of people on the street who are dangerous. And there's a crime spike and whatnot. And you've got a whole lot of rhetoric around what to do about crime. The Democrats have one point of view. I think it's clear, at least the outlines of it are clear. And if they deny defunding the police, they can't deny the fact that at their core of their constituency are a lot of people who want to defund the cops and so on. And the Republicans have a different type. So what about the border? Very clearly different sensibilities, not just concrete policies, but fundamentally different philosophies about the nature of the country. The Dems got the better of that. Do they? I don't know. What about wokeness? You wrote a book called Woke Racism, for crying out loud. The guy that just got through getting a landslide Republican victory in Florida, I'm talking around DeSantis, in his victory speech said, Florida is where woke comes to die. He's running against the thing that you're against. He's a Republican, John. What about critical race theory, et cetera? What about the 1619 Project, et cetera? What about affirmative action as a Bible and so forth? What about appealing to racial little peculiar identity things like appointing people based on their genitalia and their skin color to the U.S. Supreme Court? You for it or against it? So I'm confused, John.
I get it.
Is this Democratic thing a posture, or is it rooted in a Democratic Party preference, a posture on your part, and with respect? Or is it rooted in a comprehensive assessment of what the parties stand for and what you believe in yourself?
Yeah, I get it. It would be very advantageous of me as the quote unquote contrarian, controversial Black thinker to always say, but I'm a Democrat, because I'm hoping that people won't be so mad at me. That would be very canny. But in this case, it is genuine. For one thing, I've always been. So it wouldn't be that I was a Republican for a certain time and then, saw the light or something
like me.
Frankly, yeah. I was raised by somebody who, literally taught a course called Racism 101 at Temple University in the 70s. So this is me bred to the bone, despite the fact that because of my reserved manner, many people assume that I must be a conservative Republican, and also because I worked for the Manhattan Institute. But the Manhattan Institute doesn't mean that you're a Republican, and talking like this and moving like this and laughing like this does not mean that you're a Republican. Now, that's not what you're saying, but frankly, it's what a lot of people are thinking. But the point is, which party seems better posed to be in the position of running a complex nation in a mature, thoughtful way at any time in the future? And so all the things you described, which I did write a book against, are one kind of Democrat who get a lot of attention and scare a lot of people because of the way they use language. And what I've tried to argue in woke racism is that we need to stop letting them scare us. And signs are, and I vary from week to week on this, but signs are that what made me so angry as to write that book in 10 minutes in 2020 is ebbing. It's beginning to pass. I think David Brooks was right the other day. Those people are winning in some sub-quarters, but people are getting tired of the sorts of things that happened in 2020. Those people are beginning to be on the ropes. And to the extent that they're not, still. So, for example, I'm disgusted at the idea that there's no real crime problem, using the numbers to pretend that there's been no uptick or that nobody has any reason to be concerned in particular districts. The idea that you let dangerous people out onto the street, all with the tacit assumption that it's what society deserves because it's not really these people's fault that they're criminals, et cetera. I have no truck with any of that, what used to be called root causes. That's what all of this is. But it doesn't always have to be that way. There is pushback against people like that. And Glenn, the question for you is, if it weren't the Democrats who were in control, if you're not going to put your hat in with the Democrats and you're going to put it in with the Republicans, what do you think they would do about crime? Because if I may, you spent an awful lot of time in your career arguing about over-incarceration. Do you think that the Republicans would not wish to do what somebody could 10 years later call over-incarceration, and it would be disproportionately Black and Latino people who are over-incarcerated? I don't see that the Republicans would have better ideas. Yes, some, but the Republican Party has been taken over by lunatics. So why would I put my hat in with them when I don't see any chance of them changing anytime soon? It doesn't seem like there's as much of a vigorous conversation among Republicans other than the 2 or 3 we know in the think tank world who have kept their sense. But in terms of votes, in terms of this mostly rural white population who are voting for them and also the new people who are coming on, what would motivate me to start pulling the lever for Republicans? I just can't see it, especially now. I thought about it in the aughts, but now I don't have to explain why I'm voting for the party of Trump, even to myself.
Okay, well, they'd be tougher. What would the Republicans do? They'd be more pro-cop. They'd be more anti-teachers union. They'd be tougher on criminals. More people would go to jail. They would be disproportionately Black. They'd be criminals. Yeah, I wrote a lot about over-incarceration because we went from 500,000 in 1980 to 2 million at the turn of the century. In a 20-year period, we quadrupled the number of people on lock and key. Blacks were overrepresented amongst them. Our sentences were too long. We were too punitive. We overshot, in my opinion. But I think the post George Floyd upsurge in crime that's come out since the disorder in the summer of 2020, where we stood down, Republicans would have done what Tom Cotton wanted to do. They would have deployed muscular forces, what President Trump wanted to do, although he didn't have the authority to do it without the request from local officials. They would have deployed force on the streets to try to keep order. There would have been a deep a punitive aspect to it. And you're asking me to choose between Portland or Minneapolis or Kenosha, Wisconsin or Milwaukee or Baltimore, Freddie Gray or whatever, on the one hand, the way it went down, and a tough-minded, pugilistic speeches being given by people in the White House and in other local officials cracking down and locking people up who are behaving disorder. I choose the latter. I choose the latter unapologetically. I would be saving Black lives by choosing the latter. I'd be preserving the integrity of our society and the security and safety of our people by choosing the latter. I don't have to apologize about that. To the extent that my disgust at over-incarceration would have led me into a defund the police posture, I would have been very wrong. And I go with Ralph Mangual. I go with Heaven McDonald. I go with Roland Fryer. I think the anti-cop reaction has been an absolute fiasco and a disaster for Black people. In the immediate effect, more dead Black bodies in the cities, and in the long-term political effect, alienation of a silent majority of the American populace from an identification with the causes of these communities. So I think the cost of wokeness, the certitude of moral rectitude, and the kind of self-righteousness with which people are pronounced, that has led into absurdities like prison abolition as a policy. The cost of that to the people on behalf of whom such arguments are alleged to have been made will be reckoned in the fullness of time. So, I think when I look at these cities, look at Baltimore. Democrats have ruined it. Look at what's going on in Chicago. Read Ken Griffin, the financier billionaire guy whose Citadel hedge fund just moved out of Chicago and relocated to Miami. And they're going to spend $1 billion building a headquarters in Miami that could have been built in Chicago, because that city is becoming unlivable. Follow what the journalists who don't have their heads up their butts are actually saying about what's going on the streets in Chicago. Democrats have ruined city after city. They've ruined Detroit, et cetera. So, Rick Caruso for mayor of Los Angeles. Even some trendy, left-leaning celebrity political funders in LA are beginning to line up behind the Republican. I guess he's not a Republican, actually. I think he's used to be Republican, is now officially a Democrat, but he's the businessman developer versus the black political royalty congresswoman who's Bass, who's running out there. I go with the Republican.